and sisters, back for unlocking the mysteries of the Bible using the key of David, or with the key of David. And we were actually going to take a look at the number of a man, 666, and how the key of David actually has led us to the understanding of how that number of a man, 666, came about, where it came from. And so this is what we read in Revelations chapter 13, verse 18. Here is wisdom. Let her that have understanding count the number of the beast. So we're talking about the beast system. And then it's going to take it back to a man. And where it originated from is actually what it's going to be telling us here. So let her that hath understanding, this is wisdom, count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. And his number is 666. Wow. So what it's telling us is we need to identify what is meant by the beast. We need to identify the number of the man, or the man with this number, 666. And so if we're to understand it properly, if we have wisdom and we have understanding, then it's going to be granted to us what is meant by the beast, what is meant by the man, and who the man is with the number 666. All right, now that's what it's telling us, and we've identified that through the key of David, and we're going to share that with you tonight. So, but part of our study tonight is actually going to take us back into the Apocrypha. And for those who don't realize this, the Apocrypha was in our original King James translation when it was first put out for about the first 200 years, is what we understand. And that they cite cost, at least in some understanding, you know, that you want to go in and read, for the reason for removing it. And it was between your Old and your New Testament in the original 1611 King James. Now, what we're going to take a look at, and the reason why it was there, put in, is because they considered it corrupted canon. So, while some parts of it might be reliable, other parts are not, in their opinion. And I'm going to post a link to, what's it called, the Nicene Council. I'll post a link of Wikipedia, and you can make your own determinations, because that's where our 66 books come from. They decided what went in. They removed passages, added others in, and then stated that you couldn't remove or add words. Anyway, I'll put a link below, okay? But what we're actually going to take a look at before we get to the numbers, so it may end up being a fairly long video again. We're going to actually go to 2nd Ezra, chapter 4, and we're going to read from 4 to chapter 10, I believe, if I have the time. Now, I've made notes, and it's going to be fairly fast as we go, because there will be a third part, because I absolutely have to include a third part, and I think it will be my final one. Now, before I start reading, I'll also tell you that at some point in the future, maybe 3-4 months in the future after I've posted my last video, I do plan on doing a study on Nebat, the son of, or Jeroboam, the son of Nebat. And I had said that in one of my videos quite a while ago, but it is a subject that I do want to get into. And I will do a personal study for myself, and at the time when I do that, if I feel I should post a video, I'll post it. But I do plan on doing a study on him at some point for myself. So chapter 4 of 2nd Ezra, and Ezra is what it is in the Apocrypha. And you'll understand why I'm going to read this, because we're actually going to look at that number of men when we hit a particular passage here, but for many other reasons. And that is the identification of the daughter of Zion, or Israel, as female that was rejected. And yes, we're going to have to alter the passage in order to make the understanding fit. If you leave it the way it is, you're going to walk away with a fuddled understanding. And the truth is found in much of these books that they call corrupted canon. Though yes, it has been corrupted because they removed, again, the divine feminine and stuck passages in places where it really don't make sense to stick them in when you get studying it and reading it for yourself. So chapter 4, then the angel that had been sent to me, whose name was Uriel. So I believe this is actually Ariel, which is simply another way of saying the daughter of Zion, Israel, Ariel. She's mentioned in Isaiah 29. So I think Uriel here, and I did an understanding of how Ariel changes to Uriel according to the Jewish encyclopedia, because Ariel becomes rejected, the spirit that's outcast that no man wants a covenant with, and then Uriel takes over at the altar, is what you see in the Jewish encyclopedia, if you pull the name Uriel up. So here, the angel has been sent to him whose name was Uriel. Now this is feminine, it's not masculine. Again, they want to put everything masculine. We've been studying the divine feminine by understanding the key of David, of course. And said to me, your understanding has utterly failed regarding this world. And do you think you can comprehend the way of the Most High? So God is saying, if you don't understand, because this is the presence standing, this is one of the angels of God's presence, is what we're told in corrupted canon. Now, what we understand is the presence of God did walk the earth. And what it acts like is they were divine copies, a divine reflection from the spirit realm into the physical world. So Uriel is the divine feminine, known as the presence of God, or the camp of Mahanaim. This would be one of them, who is declared as being one of the angels that stood in the presence of God. And I believe it to be true just simply by reading some of these so-called corrupted texts. And so anyway, so your understanding has completely failed regarding this world. In Isaiah 29, God says, you turned everything upside down. That's what you did to my world. And do you think you can comprehend the way of the Most High? My ways are not your ways, God says. Then I said, yes, my Lord. And she replied to me, I have been sent to show you 3 ways and to put before you 3 problems. This is interesting. If you can solve one of these 3 problems for me, I also will show you the way you desire to me, and will reach you, and will teach you why the heart is evil. So number 1, these are the 3 things that you can answer. So we're going to answer them all. That's what we're going to do. I said, speak on, my Lord. And she said to me, go weigh for me the weight of fire. So this is one of them. Or measure for me a measure of wind. This is number 2. Or call back for me the day that is past. If you can answer one of these things for me, then I will teach you why the heart is evil. Alright? And it's simple, because once we can answer these 3 riddles that this presence of God has asked to supposedly Ezra, you actually understand why the heart is so evil. You do. And so it's important that we answer them. So what is this first one? Go away from me the weight of fire. Well, what is fire identified in the scriptures as? Law. What did God say? Within my laws is no various weights, right? I am not a God of various weights. God is saying, go away from me the weight of your law. You go away for it. Because your law is unjust weights. My law is not. My law is fair. So we're going back to why the heart is evil. Unjust law is one of them. Or measure for me a measure of wind. What's wind in the scriptures? Well, we came to 2 understandings of what wind is. Well, wind is representing of the spirit. Or wind, as we come to identify its allegorical understanding through Greek 4:17, means empty doctrines. So measure for me an unfair spirit is what it's saying. So an unfair spirit with an unjust law is what's governing our world, which might lend understanding to why the heart is so evil. And then she says, or call back for me the day that is past. So you tell me what happened from generation to generation. And if you can tell me what happened from the beginning to the end, as she asks in the Bible, then you will be able to understand why the heart is evil. So we've also identified the past from the beginning, that the first Adam rejected a covenant with his wife, which was identified as a righteous spirit, for a harlot spirit that would exalt him as God on this earth. That's what happened in this covenant. So, which then leads us back to why the law is unfair. It yokes women under the law. And why the spirit in the earth is an unfair spirit, or a spirit that is full of empty doctrines. Alright? So we've just identified all three of these riddles based on the key of David, and also hard study in other passages. So I answered, right, and said, who of those that have been born can do this? That you ask me concerning these things. Now I want you to understand, I think it's much easier to answer these three riddles at the end of days, because the Spirit is abounding, because information is abounding in the earth. We do have it at our fingertips to be able to go in and understand things that we never have before. So I think it's those at the end that are called out by God who are going to be able to truly answer these three riddles. That's what I believe. And she said to me, if I had asked you, okay. And she said to me, if I had asked you, because he says, well, who can answer these things? Who can know them? And she said, if I had asked you, how many dwellings are in the heart of the sea? Now, I personally believe that that's taking us back to Bashan, Psalm 68, where she says, I'll bring you back up from the depths of the sea, which is alluding to the daughters of Zion's covenant, where the men were tearing down the houses in Zion, or Jerusalem, denying them their rightful birthright. So they tore the houses down. So I think, and then Bashan gets cast to the depths of the sea. Nobody wants a covenant with the Holy Spirit, with the righteous daughters of Zion. So how many dwellings are in the heart of the sea, at the bottom of the ocean, right? Or how many streams are at the source of the deep? Well, we know that 4 flowed from Eden, don't we? We do know that. Or how many streams are above the firmament, or which are the exits of hell, or which are the entrances of paradise? So if we know that 4 streams flowed from Eden, which their waters got cast down, they didn't want a covenant with these righteous daughters. If we break that into 4 groups of 36,000, then we're actually identifying 144,000 first fruits, is what we're really identifying. And, or how many streams are above the firmaments, or which are the exits of hell, or which are the entrances of paradise? Perhaps you would have said to me, I never went down into the deep, nor as yet into hell, neither did I ever ascend into heaven. But now I have asked you only about fire and wind and the day, things through which you have passed, and without which you cannot exist, and you have given me no answer about them. So she's saying, if you can't answer them, how can you possibly be taught why the heart is evil? How can I teach you this if you can't even answer these 3 riddles that I'm asking you, which is actually your answer? And which is how you will be taught why the heart is so evil. The law has taught it to us, which is governed by a wicked spirit that man exalts in his heart, which is the idea he exalts a harlot so he can exalt himself and write his own laws. That's the Pharisee law. That's the Torah law. And that's our understanding as we get deeper into the study. As we got deeper into the study, that became our understanding. But now I have asked you only about the fire, the wind, and the day, things through which you have passed and without which you cannot exist. And you have given me no answer about them. And she said to me, you cannot understand the things with which you have grown up with. you don't understand them. How then can your mind comprehend the ways of the Most High, and how can one who is already worn out by the corrupt world understand incorruption? How can you understand my ways if you don't even understand why you suffer from a corrupt and evil heart? How can you possibly understand my ways? When I heard this, I fell on my face and said to her, it would be better for us not to be here than to come here and live in ungodliness and to suffer and not understand why. Well, it was handed down, we know, from father to son, and it was the vain traditions of men that got handed down. That again is spoken about in Isaiah 29. She says, God says, you reproach me with your lips, but you don't even know who I am. You are taught about me through the vain traditions of men. That's what you're taught to me about. Now, this is the verse that we're going to kind of link to the number of the man, okay? So, it's a bit sketchy at best, but we're going to use it anyway. So, she answered me and said, I went into a forest of trees of the plain, and they made a plan. All right, so we have a plain identified here. And what I knew when I read this verse and this wicked plan that got devised by the heart of man to exalt himself as God and ruler on earth and debase the righteous feminine and put a yoke on her neck, that's man-made law and lies, religious or otherwise. What I knew about that word plain is it linked my mind to the word Dura, which I had recently come across in the book of Daniel. And this is what Daniel said about Dura. So Daniel 3:1, King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold. Okay, we're going to look at 6 here. The number 6, 6. An image of gold 60 cubits high and 6 cubits wide, and set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Now, Dura will tell you it was, how did it say it? A plain in Tigris. It was connected to Tigris. Now, I'm not going to go into great detail on this because I'm just going to go by my memory. And you can go look the word Dura up, and it'll give it in the notes. And I believe the word is 1757. It means a circle, right? And a plain. And a wall. It'll give the meaning of Babylon, I believe, as wall there in that particular number. And Dura was where the Tigris River, or Tigris, this is the valley of Tigris, I think it says, was. Now, Tigris was the first, was it the first or third? Oh, I didn't make a note, so let me look it up. I have it here, so just give me a second. I'll get to it. I have it pulled up here. Where is it? It was in. It's probably one of these. It is in right there. Nope, that's not the one. Sorry. Here, do I have it pulled up? Yeah. It says a depression. Proper name of a location near Babylon. So we're looking at Duru, or Duru, is name of several places in Babylonia. Name of a small river and mounds, and probably explained as a depression. Name actually used of lower Euphrates and the Tigris Valley. Babylonia Dura equals wall, is what it says. So it's probably derived from duru, a circle or a dwelling. Dura, a place in Babylonia. Now, when you get studying the rivers in Genesis, the waters in Genesis, and that's in 2, Genesis 2. I thought I had it pulled up. Genesis 2. Okay, so in Genesis 2 Tigris River. I think it lists it under a different name. So 2, and that was verse, what verse was it, 10? I think it was 10. Yeah. And a river went out of Eden to water the gardens, and from thence it was parted and became into 4 heads. So the name of the first was Pison, that is, it which compasseth the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold. And the gold of the land is good. There is bdellium in the onyx stone. And the name of the second river is Gihon. The same is it that compasseth the whole land of Ethiopia. And the name of the third river is Hiddekel, and it is it which goeth toward the east of Assyria, and the fourth river is Euphrates. So it's Hiddekel here that is known as Tigris, which is 23:13. So Hiddekel in the Genesis 2 is one that flows out from Eden, which I'm identifying as Israel, truly on earth. And so here, the location where they set this statue that has the dimensions of a 6'6" in it, and of gold, let's keep that in mind, and it's an image of gold 60 cubits high, 6 cubits wide, and set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. So it links us back to, I believe, one of the 4 heads that flowed out from the main head in Eden, which is your water, that would water and nourish you. So here, they put up an image, and this image has 6 and 6 encoded in it, actually 60 and 6 encoded into it. Well, that becomes very important. It does so. So we're going to keep going, because it links us to Solomon. And as we understand, Solomon ends up holding something that we call, and though it's not spoken of as a real key in the Bible, it's a key of Solomon, which is the harlot spirit that Solomon builds up while he in effect tears down the key of David, all right, which is the righteous spirit, daughter Zion, where man was to receive the righteous laws of heaven from. Now, this is how this statue of gold, all right, now that statue didn't stand forever, did it? At some point that statue actually got melted down into gold, didn't it? But what we know about this image here is it became a ritual in our mind, is what it puts in your mind. And we know that that stone at the end, that's cut out without hands, identified as Zion, the mountain Zion, that smashes the 10 toes on that false image as a king and a god, is identified as the North Kingdom. These daughters of Zion come back into existence holding the spirit of wisdom's covenant, God's covenant, on their tongue. So here we will transfer the gold to Solomon in a number 666. So the ritual continues, all right? The statue of a man now comes down, I believe, to a temple where they worship a man. So Solomon in 666, the present article argues, okay, now I found this in the notes, that 666 in Revelation 13:18 is best related to the notice of Solomon, and it is, receiving 666 talents of gold. Now, where did I write it down? Right there. So the weight of gold that Solomon received was 666 talents. You see how they're shaping the beast system is what they're doing. So it comes down from the statue, a gold statue of a man as your king and your God. And then it funnels into Solomon, who daubs up the gates in the wall of David, his father, in effect shutting out the key of David and exalting the key of Solomon, identified as the harlot spirit in man's heart, which is the wife of his covenant that exalts man as God, which you see identified in Isaiah 54:1. Yet more are the children of the desolate than if she who has a husband. Now this becomes a beast system that yokes woman under a man, teaches man as God, and debases a woman, and in effect she becomes known as an idolater, and she goes against her own God, her own mother's covenant, and starts to teach man as God. Alright? This is what we kind of come to realize. So it does so because we've identified the key of Solomon as the harlot spirit that Solomon exalted. We did that in one of our studies, so I can't do it here. It's too much information to go over. But for those who understand, you're going to see it. You're going to see the beast system identified as the system that Solomon built up through the harlot spirit that taught violence. It wrote violence into the system. It perpetuated violence. It tore down the rightful heirs of the kingdom. It tore down their houses. That's the cunning women, the daughters of Zion, who were mourning for their houses. In Jeremiah chapter 9, we looked at this. And it's interesting that it begins by Nebuchadnezzar, who was a Babylonian. He comes to Solomon, I believe, in the weight of gold, 666. Now this is what most are going to say, why 666? Well, if you go to Genesis 15:9, and we'll do it right quick before we move on in the Apocrypha. So if we go to Genesis 15:9, see, so I never know where I'm going to go. I let the Spirit lead me. Sometimes I don't follow very well, but I try. So 15:9, this is what it says. And God said unto him, it's got he. God said unto him, take me a heifer, that's Israel, identifying Israel, of 3 years old, and a she-goat, that's a daughter of Zion herself, of 3 years old. Let's look at that. And a ram of 3 years old, and a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. So we have 3 females and 2 males in mention here. But the first 3 animals were to be divided in the midst. And they were to be, what? 3 years old. Well, all right. So, if we take, let me take this book here. If we take 3 times 12, what do we get? 36. That's what we get. Okay, let me move here to my camera again. We get the number 36, don't we? This is what we get. 30. It's backwards to you. What's that? Well, that's 3 sixths, isn't it? They were playing around with ritual is what they were doing. And they were trying to rewrite the covenant here, identified in the Genesis 15:9 covenant, as solely a male. That's why Nebuchadnezzar made an image of a man out of gold. That's why Solomon takes his weight in gold, 666, and he puts it towards making a temple. Now, this temple is not the temple for God. This is the temple for man. That's all it was. And then we see it, Christ saying, I'm the body, the temple. This is the temple. But there is one yet greater to come. Now, what Solomon worshipped was the harlot spirit. And the reason why Solomon worshipped the harlot spirit was because it exalted man in his heart. That's what a harlot does. That's what this whole beast system is about, perpetuating violence against women, enforcing them into a lie, and trying to trap them and ensnare them into a lie that will build man up as God. And that's what you have. And that's why God says in Hosea 2, I will remove the name of Baal out of your mouth. He is not your Lord and Master. He never was. And the word for Baal there is your husband who wants to rule over you. And we've discussed where he popped up. And he pops up in many places. So that's why this number is identifying, actually, the beast system. Because this covenant takes over the harlot spirit, and fallen Adam's covenant is what takes over. And that's why, again, we'll go back to the Shulamite says, look not upon me because I am black. The sun, the false light, has looked upon me. My mother's sons were angry with me. They made me the keeper of the vineyard, but my own I have neglected. So she starts to teach his vineyard, becomes known as his, not hers, because they're hearkening to the spirit of his covenant, the one that he wants, which is the harlot that will teach him as God. At which point he takes control of the law and yokes her under him. All right? So that's to be understood. So I wanted to stop at that verse because we got a lot of reading to do, because it absolutely validates what we're teaching. And okay, so, and I went into a forest of trees of the plain, and they made a plan. Now it speaks of the devices of a wicked shepherd, and that plan shows up in Psalm 83 for anybody who wants to go take a look at that chapter. And said, come, let us go and make war against the sea, that it may recede before us, and that we may make for ourselves more forests, a place to dwell. And in like manner, the waves of the sea. I find this a strange rendering. I got an idea this is corrupted text right here, because it doesn't really make sense, at least not at this point. So, and in like manner, the waves of the sea also made a plan and said, come, let us go up and subdue the force of the plain, so that there also we may gain more territory for ourselves. So we know there was a heavenly battle that was playing out, and we looked at that, and it was in Judges 5 where it says, and the stars, or the planets, fought from their courses against Caesarea. So there was a heavenly battle that was taking place. And so this is allegorical, I think, more to the heavenly battle, which then comes down to an earthly battle. So she says, in order to understand the heavens, you need first to understand what's going on your own planet. And that's why she posed those three riddles to Ezra to answer. And she says, when you can answer those riddles, then you'll understand the heavenly battle. So here, that's what this is actually allegorical to, I think, is the heavenly battle here. So they say, come, let us go up and subdue the force of the plain, so that there also we may gain more territory for ourselves. But the plan of the force was in vain, for the fire came and consumed it. That's the law. That's the law. They came and consumed the plan of the forest. All right? Likewise, also the plan of the waves of the sea, for the sand stood firm and stopped them. So here we get the sand. Well, where else did we find sand? Well, it was a promise to Abraham, and actually it was a promise to Sarah, who is the mother of us all from above. Israel is actually her name, chief, and the first fruits. It was actually a promise to her and him, but it was largely to her, but it's got him, that his offspring would be more numerous than the sand. His offspring that would fill the heavens. Well, it's her offspring is what it's identified as. When we take the head that's shoved into the ground here and set the whole thing up properly, we understand that the seed belonged to the woman. And that's why it says the woman's seed. That's why it says there'll be enmity against the woman's seed and the serpent's seed. Well, the serpent's seed is identified as the harlot that Adam exalted in his heart so he could play God. And that's why the Shulamite is teaching his vineyard and not her own. All right? So it's all there. So this is a promise. It says, likewise also the plan of the waves of the sea, for the sand, the actual children of the heavens stood firm and stopped them. That's what it looks like it's saying. If now you were a judge between them, which would you undertake to justify and which to condemn? So it's a question. How would you judge that? And I answered and said, each has made a foolish plan. For the land is assigned to the forest, and to the sea is assigned a place to carry its waves. Well, that don't make a whole lot of sense. There's got to be something else there. Because the sea is more than just about carrying waves. So I'm going to suggest that there is something wrong in the rendering here. But this, nevertheless, there's a question posed here. So who would you judge? What would be your judgment on this? All right, we're going to learn something from this is what we're going to do. And she answered me and said, you have judged rightly. Okay, so he says, I answered and said, each has made a foolish plan. For the land is assigned to the forest, and to the sea is assigned a place to carry its waves. All right. So she answered me and said, you have judged rightly. You've made the right judgment. But why have you not judged so in your own case? So what was Ezra actually doing when you get reading in through this second Ezra? He was actually advocating for his homeland, or for his nation Israel. That's what he was advocating for, and saying, why has all of this happened to us? Why? So she relates all of these things back to him to teach him something about the heart of man, is what she's trying to do here with her riddles and with the allegories. So she answered me and said, you have judged rightly, but why have you not judged so in your own case, in Israel's case? Why have you chosen your own Israel and put everything else out there as, what you would judge against? For as the land is assigned to the forest and the sea to its waves, so also those who dwell upon the earth can understand only what is on the earth. And she who is above the heavens can understand what is above the heights of heaven. Well, I believe that's the Ancient of Days, known as wisdom. She understands it all. Then I answered and I said, I beseech you, my Lord, why have I been endowed with the power of understanding? You tell me why I understand these things. Well, what he understands by the end is that he didn't understand them so well as he thought. So, for I did not wish to inquire about the ways above, but about those things which we daily experience. Why Israel has been given over to the Gentiles as a reproach, and why the people whom you loved have been given over to godless tribes, and the law of it's got fathers, our mothers, it was our mother's law you were to uphold. So Israel's identified as the mother of us all from above in Galatians 4. So we got the correct rendering here. But he's saying, he's on her behalf. Even though he's saying man, it's saying male here. He's really advocating for Israel's rights and saying, why have we been cast down? Why has our mother's laws been made of no effect, and the written covenant no longer exists? Why? So, wait. He already got his answer. He got his answer back in this verse. I can't see it. It's too small. Where's my... It's so small. They wrote the verse so small you can't hardly see them. And I've written over it. So it's 20, verse 20. It's chapter 4 of 2nd Ezra in the Apocrypha. And she answered me, though it's got he, it's Uriel. Answering, she's angry. This is what they're against them, really. Ariel was for, Uriel's against is what we come to understand. So she answered me and said, you have judged rightly, but why have you not judged so in your own case? Then that comes down to verse 23, and he tries to say, but I didn't ask about heavenly things, I asked about earthly things. Well, he had already received his answer. What was God actually saying there? God is saying, you judged rightly in this matter, but in this matter where Israel was guilty, and I cannot take her side in this case until she stands up and starts teaching the truth of my covenant, can I take her side? So she is saying, is this what she's saying? Is God saying, Israel, got what she deserved? She's not standing up to him. She's playing man's harlot. She's teaching his religious lies to her own children that came of her. And I cannot take her side. I can't. She has to stand up for my truth and be identified as my righteous daughter Israel before I can enter in on her behalf. That is why God is saying what God is saying. That's why God says, why have you judged rightly? These two here were trying to do wicked things, as is the covenant between fallen Adam and the harlot identified as wickedness in God's eyes. Because Adam chose to exalt the harlot in his heart, which became the wife of his covenant identified in Isaiah 54. Yet more are the children of the desolate than of she who has a husband. So Israel is promised to be returned to the land through the spirit of her own covenant, that she finally wakes up and starts teaching to her children. But my own vineyard I have not kept. She's going to have to start keeping her own vineyard, teaching her children the spirit of her covenant that came from Mother Wisdom from above, Mother Israel from above, if she expects her to take her side. You see? You see what he's being told? And he don't even know he's being told it. Alright? So why Israel has been given over to the Gentiles as a reproach? Well, number one, we knew that the men of Israel cast off a covenant with the righteous daughters. We also identified that God said, I will expand your birthright, and you will not only be a light unto your own people, Israel, but to the Gentiles as well. And so we see how that gets accomplished actually by her casting them out. But here she's saying, I can't take Israel's side if Israel don't take her own side. I can't take her side if she's going to play man's harlot. So we see that. That's an interesting thing to realize. And while we pass from the world like locusts in our life, okay, is like a mist, and we are not worthy to obtain mercy. But what will she do for her name, by which we are called? That's Israel. We're called by Israel's name. It is about these things that I have asked. So he's asking about Israel. And he's actually getting answers and riddles that if he could answer them, he'd have his answer. Right? And once you have the answer to something, then usually it should provide for us a means to be able to change what is wrong. That's what it should be able to do for us all. So she answered me and said, if you are alive, you will see. And if you live long, you will often marvel, because the age is hastening swiftly to its end. For it will not be able to bring the things that have been promised to the righteous in their appointed times, because this age is full of sadness and infirmities. For the evil about which you ask me has been sown, but the harvest of it has not yet come. Well, we know that to be true, don't we? Because we see evil around us, right? We see that. So the harvest hasn't happened yet. If therefore that which has been sown is not reaped, and if the place where the evil has been sown does not pass away, so it's talking about in the earth, the field where the good has been sown will not come. So it's saying that the harvest of the wicked has to happen first, which we realize it's the threshing given as a right to the daughter of Zion when she comes back into existence, holding the spirit of her covenant on her tongue, that allows her to thresh the nations and to call out the wicked, and then to bring forth the righteous. That's what we've understood in our studies. I can't go into every detail here because I'm already at 43 minutes and I'm not even in chapter 5. So this is crazy. It's going to be a long video. So, for a grain of evil seed was sown in Adam's heart. It specifies Adam, the man, I believe, from the beginning. And there's a verse in the Bible, and I found it. She says, I knew from the womb you were wicked. And she's talking about the first Adam. For a grain of evil seed was sown in Adam's heart from the beginning, and how much ungodliness it has produced until now, and will produce until the time of the threshing comes. Who threshes? Go to Micah 4, verse 13. That's where we'll find who threshes. Consider now for yourself how much fruit of ungodliness a grain of evil seed has produced. Well, it's produced a lot, hasn't it? When heads of grain without number are sown, how great a threshing floor they will fill. Then I answered and said, how long and when will these things be? Why are our years few and evil? We do not live long, and what we do live is mostly saw as wickedness. She answered me and said, you do not hasten faster than the Most High. It means it'll be accomplished in her time. For your haste is for yourself. That's right. For us, it's like it's not coming fast enough. And yet for the generation when it does hit, they say, too soon. You see? So we really want it to all happen for us, for our own sake, for ourselves, right? Of course we do. We're quite self-centered that way, aren't we? For your haste is for yourself. But the highest hastens on behalf of the many. So slow your time frame down. You're moving too fast. But the Most High says, but the highest will hasten on behalf of the many, not on just the few. And we'll understand what's that meaning when we read this. Did not the souls of the righteous in their chambers ask about these matters, saying, how long are we to remain here, and when will come the harvest of our reward? And Jeremiel, another angel, the archangel, answered them and said, when the number of those like yourselves is completed, for she has weighed the age. There you go. In an even balance, by the way. She weighs, she's fair in her weight system. Though there is a complaint, and I think we looked at it in our last video, or I was gonna, but I didn't get to it. And I can't remember if it's in Ezekiel 32, 33, or 34. But at one point the man accuses God and says, your weights are unfair. Your law is unfair. And she throws it right back at them and she says, it is your system and your laws that are unfair. Mine are even. And it's the men who are complaining there because the men believe that they're valued more, right? That's what they teach themselves, that they're of higher value. They're of more importance than any female. And so she throws it right back and she says, you're the unfair one. You don't see all things. I do. You play God like you know all things. You don't. So here she says, when I weigh in a fair balance. You don't. And so she says, when the number of those like yourself is completed, for she has weighed the age and the balance, I'm fair about it, and measured the times by measure, and numbered the times by number, and she will not move or awaken them, it says arouse them, awaken them until that measure is fulfilled, right? So though we're in a hurry and we want everything to wrap up, she says not until the time or the number is fulfilled, right? Then I answered and said, O sovereign Lord, that's daughter Zion, 136. 136 is always identified as sovereign Lord. You will never find 113 as sovereign. The sovereign is 136, and that is the branch of his strength out of Zion in Psalm 110. And is she, 136, the Lord that sits to his right, will strike through kings in the day of her wrath. And she will only do that when she has brought forth the correct measure, the correct number. Then I answered and said, O sovereign Lord, but all of us also are full of ungodliness. And it is perhaps on account of us that the time of the threshing is delayed for the righteous, and on account of the sins of those who dwell on earth. She answered me, said, go and ask a woman who is with child, if, when her 9 months have been completed, her womb can keep the child within her any longer. And I said, well, no, Lord, it cannot. And she said to me, in Hades, the chambers of the souls are like the womb. For just as a woman who is in travail makes haste to escape the pangs of birth, so also do these places hasten to give back those things that were committed to them from the beginning. So I'm thinking of Jude 1:6 here, is what I'm thinking. So then the things that you desire to see will be disclosed to you, then you will know. I answered and said, if I have found favor in your sight, and if it is possible, and if I am worthy, show me this also, whether more time is to come than has passed, or whether for us the greater part has gone by. So this was in Ezra day. For I know what has gone by, but I do not know what is to come. And she said to me, stand at my right side, and I will show you the interpretation of a parable. So I stood and looked, and behold, a flaming furnace passed by before me. That takes us to Genesis 15. And to that covenant when Abraham fell asleep, and he says he had a nightmare. It was a nightmare to him. It was awful. And he witnessed a furnace with a smoldering flame inside that passed through the divided animals, and then the turtle dove and the dove, which each had been placed to one side. And so this takes us to that Genesis 15 covenant. So I stood and looked, and behold, a flaming furnace passed by before me, and when the flame had gone by, I looked, and behold, the smoke remained. And after this, a cloud full of water. So cloud in the New Testament, and I believe probably the Old, I'm not sure, is actually an allegory again to witnesses. So after this, a cloud full of water. So the witnesses with water, which is representing the word of God, or not the word, actually that would be dry, which we're going to hit that cistern that they fall into, which has not got water in it anymore. This, a cloud full of water, passed before me and poured down a heavy and violent rain. And when the rainstorm had passed, drops remained in the cloud. So I'm thinking, sort of to some degree, that this is actually an allegory, the threshing of the daughters of Zion, that you find in Micah 4 and 5. They're likened to a lioness that no one can escape from, who, if she goeth forth, teareth in pieces, and none can deliver, it says in Micah. And we know that that's an allegory to Ariel, who is the lioness of God, which they laid a siege against her and came against her in Isaiah 29. So the fire is greater in the drops of... Then I prayed and said, do you think that I shall live until those days, or who will be alive in those days? And she answered me and said, concerning the signs about which you asked me, I can tell you in part, but I was not sent to tell you concerning your life, for I do not know. So this is Uriel, the presence of God, a copy. That's actually what I tend to think it means. You don't have to agree. But it looks like a copy, an image of the divine, of what exists there in the heavens. And these are copies, and they're known as the presence of God on earth, which is identified as a feminine. So chapter 5, now concerning the signs, behold, the days are coming, when those who dwell on the earth shall be seized with great terror, and the way of truth. So the woman who is travailing as the restrainer that's been held back and is no longer restrained, you find her in Isaiah 42, and she says, long time have I holden my peace. Now will I go forth as a travailing woman. I will destroy and I will devour at once. She says, I've been long time silenced, and I've been restrained. So, but she says, I'm going to lead them in paths that they have not known, a way that they did not know. So, and the way of truth shall be hidden. So at this time, the way of truth was hidden from them, which is why you have Ezra asking the questions as he's asking about Israel, because the truth has been hidden from even his eyes, that he did not know it. And the land shall be barren of faith, and unrighteousness shall be increased beyond what you yourself see, and beyond what you heard of formerly. So, the harlot spirit that feeds out to the four corners of the world, and the lying theology from Babylon, the harlot that became exalted in the heart of the men of Israel when Balaam told Balak to go get his women and send them into the men of Israel and seduce them with a lie. That's the lying law that he came to write, which exalts a man as God, and took the right hand of God out, which we identified as the daughters of Zion. Alright? Who will be the ones responsible for destroying the Leviathan, who took control of the word, of her word. So, in the land which you now see ruling shall be waste and untrodden, and men shall see it desolate. Oh, there's that desolate spirit. Yet more are the children of the desolate woman spirit than of she who has a husband. She who has a husband is the harlot, identified as the word Baal there, which is basically man exalting himself, which is why you saw this temple, this male image that King Nebuchadnezzar made come down into a temple that then I think Solomon knew and made it into a temple where then they come to worship male as God, which leads to the desolation of the spirit, and she began to teach her children his laws, and then they become his vineyard, but my own I have not kept, right? So she becomes the desolate spirit, and he exalts his harlot because she'll teach his lies and build him up. That's also akin to the Jezebel spirit. But if the Most High grants that you live, you shall see it thrown into confusion after the third period. Okay, so daughters of Israel, spirit of truth. Okay, so I've made notes. So we're in the darkness, and the sun shall suddenly shine forth at night, because we're in the darkness, right? And the moon during the day. Now, I tend to think the moon is allegorical to the fallen sons, the powers of darkness that took control of her light, her law, her word, and Lucifer becomes the false light shining on the world, the harlot spirit that builds man up as God in the heart of man, which leads you to Babylon. In Isaiah 47, she says, I will never be widowless, I will never be childless, no one sees me. She's saying, I'm hid in Adam's heart. He loves being king, he loves playing God, he loves you, teaching him as God, he loves you, bowing to him in his laws, and him building himself up with your riches. Debasement causes that to take place, that your work becomes of no value. His is what matters, and he steals your riches from you. He empowers himself under a man-made religious lie and law known as the Torah that fed out from Israel to the four corners of the world, which we just saw that doing. So it abounded. Unrighteousness increased beyond what you yourself could see. So it did feed out. In the origins is where it fed from, because they took control of the men of Israel is what they did. And that actually leads us to, now maybe I shouldn't discuss it right now, but I'm going to look at it right now. Alright? Alright. So we'll leave it there. I'm going to have to probably make another video just on this portion of it. But if you go to Jeremiah, we've done this passage, but we're going to explain it a little differently this time, I think. 31, verse 22, it says, How long wilt thou go about, O thou backsliding daughter? What daughter? Israel. Zion. The 10 northern tribes of Israel, which are identified as your divine feminine, that you saw Solomon daubing up the gates, so that the key of David, which was identified as these righteous daughters, could not pass through the gates to teach them the laws of heaven. And he installed a harlot spirit known as the key of Solomon that would teach him as God, male as God, in his laws and his religious lies. And so, how long wilt thou go about, O thou backsliding daughter? For the Lord has created a new thing in the earth. A woman, oh, who's the woman, shall compass a man. Who's the man? Well, the woman is Israel. The man is what physical Israel is called today. Alright? Now let me explain this. The Semitic line, which is Israelites, identified as Israelites, came from Shem, which was the second son of Noah. So Noah had 3 sons. Shem was the oldest. Japheth was the second, and Cush was the third, I believe. So Shem was identified as the son that the Israelites would come through. Now this is what we've been told. Japheth and Cush would be the 2 sons where the Gentile nations all come from. Now, when Israel began to grow as this behemoth nation that you see laid out as a cherubim or a seraphim, in Numbers 2, as this great camp, Balak became terrified of the power that they were exhibiting just through sheer number alone in their sheer size. And so Balak hires Balaam to curse him, right? At which point, when Balaam is not able to do that, Balak gets quite frustrated with Balaam. And he says, I hired you to curse him, what good are you to me? If you can't curse him, then you're of no value to me. And then at that point, Balaam says, go get your women and send them into the men of Israel and seduce them, and we'll take the right hand of God out that way, who was identified as the daughters of Zion, the daughters of Israel. Now, what happens? Because you claim your lineage through the woman's seed. That's how Israel, you understood that you were Israelite through your mother. Now what happens is it actually gets traded around by this understanding. Because the men begin to take harlot wives, all of whom the sons of God chose, the sons of Zion. They turned on their own mothers, is what we understood in Lamentations 4:1, who were identified as the holy ones or the sacred gems that should have been exalted in the high priest's breastplate by the sons of Zion, who were known as the gold that encrusted these precious gemstones, your holy ones of Israel, which is the covering on Judah, the man, which gave him protection. She was there to try his ways. That's what she was there. Now, the sons cast off a covenant with these righteous daughters, known as the scepter, and the way that God ruled on earth. They were known as God on earth, the presence of God on earth. Israel, God wrestles, and it was defined by her daughters. Now, when the sons began to take on them all of these wives, these sons of God, Israel was God on this earth, the daughters were, or these sons of Zion in Lamentations 4:1. They actually changed their genetics. And what happens is the women, the scepter, that they cast off, Shiloh, they cast her out into the lands of the Gentiles. That's what they did. That would be the lands of Japhethah's descendants and Cush's descendants. And these daughters end up, this scepter, that the sons of Zion did no longer want in covenant as a way to rule, gets cast off out into the lands of the Gentiles, per the promise made to her that she would claim the Gentiles as her own children in Isaiah 49, chapter 49. And she's identified as Ephraim, the firstborn of mother's womb. All right? God's womb. And so what happens when these daughters gets tossed out there, they actually end up as a woman that will now compass Adam, fallen Adam, who no longer wanted her in covenant. And the woman that is now surrounding Adam, who cast off a covenant with her, is Israel. That's what it's saying. Israel with her children out in the fields of the Gentiles. And mother says to this daughter of Zion, 136 her number, in Psalm 2, she says, ask of me the heathens, and I'll give them all to you. And she did. And she did. And the scepter will not depart from between Judah's feet. That's the second Adam, who receives this spirit of the covenant as the scepter in the way that he will rule. All right? Now, with fallen Adam, he chose to rule himself. I'm going to rule and I'm going to subjugate her under me. The way that the new Adam rules is through her. She was the glory of the kingdom. And he cast her down, the first Adam cast her down. And when she came under him and started to teach his religious lies, she becomes known as the harlot spirit. Christ exalts the key of David, and that is his scepter. And she now holds that scepter because she is the queen of the kingdom. And it is the spirit of her covenant that is promised to rule the kingdom. In which way you see yet more the children of the desolate than of she who has a husband. Yet in these passages in Ezra, it tells it a lot differently. So we'll keep looking at it because it does validate a lot of what we're saying. So, okay, so the way of truth shall be hidden, and the land shall be barren of faith. Where was I? Okay, so I was looking at the moon. And the sun shall suddenly shine forth at night. So it's during the dark that she awakens. The spirit of Israel awakens out in the lands of the Gentiles. And she begins to shine because she is the light of the world, the true light of the world, the true sun of the world. Sun, S-U-N, the light. Which it says, I will make your pinnacles of ruby. I believe that too is found in Isaiah 54. And pinnacle there is another word for sun. So you're almost looking at why Adam was identified as a red man. Because the light that should have shone on him should have been the pinnacles of ruby, from what we understand. And we have a false light shining on us. The lie that man exalts in his heart. And so the sun shall suddenly shine forth at night, and the moon during the day. Blood shall drip from wood, and the stone, we find the stone in Joseph's blessing in Genesis 49, verse 23-24. You want to look at that. And the stone shall utter its voice, the peoples shall be troubled, and the stars shall fall. So truth takes out the lie, is what it does. And one shall reign, whom those who dwell on earth do not expect. And that's female. They're all expecting a male. It's not a male that rules and reigns. It's the spirit of the original covenant, which was the glory, identified as the last thing created, which would have been woman, which would have been Israel herself. So, and one shall reign, whom those who dwell on earth do not expect, and the birds shall fly away together. And the sea of Sodom. So the sea of Sodom, if we understand what that means, it's a man with a man. It's a man inside of a man. And when a man is teaching himself as God, he will cause the righteous spirit to be desolate because she's teaching his lies right with him. And so it becomes the abomination of desolation. She becomes desolate because he refuses to teach the law and the spirit of her covenant, instead building up for himself a harlot spirit that will teach him as God, which is called the abomination that maketh desolate, a man inside of a man. And she says, you'll have no children. You will have no children. And she becomes desolate because of his rejecting of her spirit. So, and the sea of Sodom shall cast up fish. What's fish? Well, it's going to have followers. And one whom the many do not know shall make her voice heard by night, in the nighttime, and all shall hear her voice. There shall be chaos also in many places, and fire shall often break out. And the wild beasts shall roam beyond their haunts, and the childbearing women shall bring forth monsters. And salt water shall be found in the sweet, and all friends shall conquer one another. Then shall reason hide itself, and wisdom shall withdraw herself into her chamber. And that's what she says, wisdom says in Proverbs 1. When I called, you didn't answer. So now I have to send a rod of iron, to which then takes you to Psalm 2. So you'll want to read Proverbs 1 and Psalm 2 together, all right? Because then that'll further your understanding that it's wisdom, and she's speaking to her daughter, Zion, 136, this day have I begotten thee. And she shall be sought by many, but shall not be found. And the unrighteous and unrestrained shall increase on the earth. And one country shall ask its neighbor, has righteousness, or any one who does right, passed through you? And it will answer, no. They're all wickedness. That kind of takes you back. I'll judge the circumcised with the uncircumcised. You're no different. You all exalt the harlot, so you exalt yourself, and man is God. That's what you do. And at that time men shall hope, but not obtain. They shall labor, but their ways shall not prosper. These are the signs which I am permitted to tell you. And if you pray again, and weep as you do now, and fast for 7 days, you shall hear yet greater things than these. Then I awoke, and my body shuddered violently, and my soul was so troubled that it fainted. Okay, so I'm gonna try to get through this chapter, and then I'm gonna cut it off at that point, and then I'll make another video to do 6, 7, 8, 9. Hopefully, because I want to bolt through them, but it's important enough that I think they be read. But the angel who had come and talked with me held me and strengthened me and set me on my feet. Now on the second night, Phaltiel, chief of the people, came to me and said, "Where have you been, and why is your face sad? Or do you not know that Israel has been entrusted to you in the land of their exile? Rise therefore and eat some bread, so that you may not forsake us, like a shepherd who leaves the flock in the power of cruel wolves." So the second night, a chief of the people came. This is not an angel. It's interesting that the surname tagged on L on all of these angels, and yet this is just a chief of the people. It's just interesting, isn't it? Or do you not know that Israel has been entrusted to you? Rise therefore and eat some bread, so that you may not forsake us like a shepherd who leaves the flock in the power of cruel wolves. So the shepherds did that. The shepherdess also said she was going to do that because the men no longer wanted her in covenant, to which we see God saying to her presence on earth, they got it in mail. She says, "Take 2 staves, and write 2 names on them. Your name," I believe is what she's saying. Write your name and the inheritance that you inherited when you came here. And break them in front of all the people. And it was a symbol of the breaking of her covenant, her spirit with man. And she says, hand them over, let them have the devices of a wicked shepherd if that's what they want. Give it to them. And it'll be their teacher. You know, hardship, torment will be your teacher, is what I think is the message here. The false law, the wicked law, written by the hand of man, will be their teacher. It will teach them what I cannot possibly teach them. So she says, like a shepherd who leaves the flock in the power of cruel wolves. And that's what happened. Then I said to her, "Depart from me and then I said to him," I don't know if this is a him or her, "Depart from me and do not come near me for 7 days, and then you may come to me." And I heard what I said, and she heard what I said, he heard what I said, and left. So I fasted 7 days, mourning and weeping, as Uriel the angel commanded me. So I'm thinking this is really a he here. Alright, because we know it was the men that come to rule. So I fasted 7 days, mourning and weeping, as Uriel the angel had commanded me. And after 7 days the thoughts of my heart were very grievous to me again. Then my soul recovered the spirit of understanding, and I began once more to speak words in the presence of the Most High. So the a copy, identified as the presence of God here on earth, the camp of Mahanaim, which we clearly identified as feminine. So the presence of God, or the Spirit of God, is female. So, and I said, "O sovereign Lord." This is interesting. Now, I didn't get this book, these 3 books, the Apocrypha and 2 other ones that came as a set. I can't remember the exact year, but it was about 2013 that I got these books. So I want you to know I wasn't exposed to this. I didn't know this. And I did know Song of Songs in the year 2004 when I had my dream about the vined lilies. Alright? So, and I've got that dream posted for anybody who wants to look at it. But I have never come in contact with these passages. And though I probably had briefly glanced at Song of Songs, it wasn't a book I had ever studied thoroughly in 2004 to my knowledge. I don't remember ever really getting into a thorough, hard study of the book until about 2013, which is about the same time I got this book. So this is important because I saw a vined lily in my dream, and it said, "Then my soul recovered the spirit of understanding, and I began once more to speak words in the presence of the Most High. And I said, O sovereign Lord, from every forest of the earth and from all its trees thou hast chosen one vine." All right, well, we can set that aside. And from all the lands of the world thou hast chosen for thyself one region, and from all the flowers of the world thou hast chosen for thyself one lily. Now I think a lily, singular, is identifying one woman, as in the sense that it says your mother will flow like a vine in your blood. So I kind of see a lineage here being shown as a vine that was chosen in the very beginning. And she said, I chose you in the beginning, I'll choose you in the end. You will be my glory in the end. So she's talking about the daughter of Israel, the woman's seed. And so she says, I will choose one vine, one region, and one lily. Well, now the interesting thing why you want to separate these three, I saw a lily vine is what I saw, a vine of lilies that was growing on a lattice that went on for miles and miles and miles. And they were orange-colored lilies with gold centers. And it was my job to water these lilies. Now, that was before I knew anything about the lilies of the covenant. It was before I knew anything about Song of Songs. It was before I ever got a copy of the Apocrypha and read this and was able to understand what Ezekiel 19 was speaking of, our mother in our blood like a vine, she flows. And I wonder if it ain't the water. Our mother, the water of our original covenant, which you were to receive from your wife, Proverbs 5. And then is identified in Song of Songs 4:12 to 15, which flows from Lebanon. The living water. What will give you life? And it's referring to the law of heaven, which was received by the presence of God, identified as the daughters of Zion, which man cast off the men of Israel and exalted a harlot, and then becomes known actually as the man Adam, with the woman Israel surrounding him. A strange thing is seen in the earth, which then leads us back to Isaiah 49. So, what time is it? Okay. So, and after 7 days, the thoughts of my heart, okay, where was I? Okay, so she's going to choose. And it says in Hosea 14, Israel will blossom like the lily. That's what it says. So, and from all the depths of the sea thou hast filled for thyself one river. So the doctrine is identified as the dew of heaven. So it's an idea of being able to separate the admixture of doctrine is almost embedded in that idea. So from all the depths of the sea thou hast filled for thyself one river. And from all the cities that have been built thou hast consecrated Zion for thyself. It should say daughter Zion. They never want to speak of the daughter in a singular sense. They always want to go, it's a son and then many, 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 many brides. That was never the doctrine of heaven. That was the doctrine of fallen Adam, who wanted to exalt himself. And the harlot does that. And from all the birds that have been created, thou hast named for thyself one dove. You find that dove laying in the ash heaps, in the midst of her flock, identified as 136, the sovereign Lord. That's her number there in Psalm 68, which we looked at. And the flock that she's in the midst of is identified as a village of women who published the word, who met in the congregation as the congregation of the north. And that takes you to the house in the forest of Lebanon, which we're going to get at in the next video, hopefully. And from all the flocks that have been made, thou hast provided for thyself. It's got one sheep. No, it's a she-goat. The Genesis 15:9 covenant establishes that fact for us. And have provided for thyself, have one she-goat. That's the daughter of Zion herself. That's what she's provided. Or even you could say the heifer, identifying Israel as the nation of Israel, where her glory would be seen, her daughters. And from all the multitude of peoples thou hast gotten for thyself one people. And this people whom thou hast loved, thou hast given the law, which is approved by all. We've established the law comes from wisdom, the mothers, of Israel were to give the law that they received from Mother God, from above. Israel is the mother of us all. They met in the congregation of the north, which would take you to the house in the forest of Lebanon, and the government of God, and the way that God ruled on earth. Man's rule on earth was through woman, not through himself exalting a harlot so he could teach lies of religion and yoke her under him as God, and treat his male form as God, God, God. And now, O Lord, why hast thou given over the one to the many, and dishonored the one root beyond the others, and scattered thine only one among the many? That's Israel. We're identifying Israel here. The daughters. The scepter that the men, the males of Israel, cast off for a covenant with those harlots that Balaam told Balak to go get and send in to the men of Israel. And we are told the purpose was to contaminate the woman's seed with the lie. That's right. To which we see the Shulamite then saying, but my own vineyard I have not kept. Okay. So you have scattered thine only one among the many. She is precious. She is the firstborn of her womb. She's identified as Ephraim also. Israel, Ephraim. Israel went by the name Ephraim. The north kingdom, the 10 northern tribes, which is the scepter in the way man was to rule. And he cast her off, didn't want her. And those who opposed thy promises have trodden down those who believed thy covenants. So those who opposed the promises. So those were largely identified as men. They were males. We've done studies on this. Who have trodden down those who believed thy covenants. So the daughters who were trying to hold a line couldn't hold it. They got overpowered. But God says, if the casting away of them be the reconciling of the world, what shall the receiving of them be but life from the dead? So in Romans 11, we're actually told a reason why it was permitted to happen, and it was so that all nations could be reconciled to her spirit, if they so chose it. So they trod down those who did believe in the covenant of peace and of wisdom's laws. And we discussed that all in the Key of David when we studied what it all was about. If thou dost really hate thy people, then they should be punished at thy own hand. When I had spoken these words, the angel who had come to me on a previous night was sent to me. And she said to me, listen to me, and I will instruct you, pay attention to me, and I will tell you more. And I said, speak, my Lord. And she said to me, are you greatly disturbed in mind over Israel? Or do you love her more than her maker does, more than her mother? Do you love her more than her mother does? And we're going to find the answer to this as we read further on. An answer that he's not going to really be looking for or expecting, because he thinks he does. He thinks he loves Israel, but she really tells him differently. Or do you love her more than her mother, Israel from above, or wisdom, who is her mother, which she represents on earth? And I said, no, my Lord, but because of my grief I have spoken. For every hour I suffer agonies of heart, while I strive to understand the way of the Most High, and to search out part of her judgment. So he's trying to understand why this and how this has all come about. Which, if he could answer these 3 riddles over here, he'd already understand why. Why the wickedness in the heart exists. Why the evil is there. Understand the way of the Most High, and to search out part of her judgment. And she said to me, you cannot. And I said, why not, my Lord? Why then was I born? Or why did not my mother's womb become my grave? I believe it's the opposite of that. It kind of did. Your mother's womb did become your grave. Because you chose to exalt a harlot, and that harlot brought on death for you. in the land. So, in a sense, we die, and our mother's womb does become our grave. In a sense, that I might not see the travail of Israel and the exhaustion of the people of Israel. He don't even know what he's saying. And yet all of it is going to be shown. What he's striving at, he actually, deep down, he's already knowing the answer to and don't even know it if he just would look at things differently, such as the judgment that he cast between the two. And she's saying, now place that on Israel. Why was Israel cast off? Because you're not teaching my truth, you're not teaching my law, you're not teaching God as God. And those becomes the answers in the end, expounded on in a much greater way, of course. She said to me, count up for me those who have not yet come, and gather for me the scattered raindrops, and make the withered flowers bloom again for me. Open for me the closed chambers, and bring forth for me the winds shut up in them, or show me the picture of a voice, and then I will explain to you the travail that you ask to understand. So he says, or why did not my mother's womb become my grave, that I might not see the travail of, it says, Jacob. Well, Jacob isn't travailing. It's Israel's travailing to bring forth her children, her firstborn. It says in Romans 11, what has Israel not obtained? That which, it says she seeketh for. She was teaching his vineyard. Now she's travailing to bring forth her own children, that are children holding the spirit of her covenant. But my own vineyard have I not kept. And then she begins to shine bright like the sun, the light, the truth that she was supposed to be upon this earth, which was why God could not take her side. All right, so these become our answers when we understand the key of David. Open for me the closed chambers, and bring forth for me the winds shut up in them, or show me the picture of a voice, and then I'll explain to you the travail that you ask to understand. And I said, O sovereign Lord, who is able to know these things except she, whose dwelling is not with men? That's our mother Israel from above, which is the spirit that will bring life to us all. And once the daughters become filled with the spirit of the original covenant, which came from mother from above, then she begins to travail to bring forth her own children, who will receive the spirit of her covenant, which was the laws gave by our mother wisdom. As for me, I am without wisdom, and how can I speak concerning the things which thou hast asked me? And she said to me, just as you cannot do one of the things that were mentioned, so you cannot discover my judgment, or the goal of the love that I have promised for my people. So until you can answer all of these things, you can't understand the goal of my love. You don't understand it. So, and I said, yet behold, O Lord, thou dost have charge of those who are alive at the end. But what will those do who were before us, or we, or those who come after us? And she said to me, I shall liken my judgment to a circle, a rotation. Which also was linking to the idea of Dura, where the idol was set up. It was a circle, I think. So I shall liken my judgment to a circle, just as for those who are last, there is no slowness. Yeah, a circle that meets, right, is what she's saying, right? The end will meet the beginning will meet the end. So she said to me, I shall liken my judgment to a circle. Just as for those who are last, there is no slowness. So you're not slow, you're right on time. So for those who are first, there is no haste. And there was no haste for them to meet. How does that go? So there is no slowness. So for those who are first, there is no haste. So if we weren't late, then they weren't early, right? So then I answered and said, couldst thou not have created at one time those who have been, and those who are, and those who will be, that thou mightest show thy judgment the sooner? So again, he wants to make haste for his own benefit by saying, God, you could have made us all at one time and saved us all this turmoil and trouble, which was the point of the whole trial, was that we might learn where we failed, where we went wrong with God and God's covenant. And if we haven't learned that by the end, then there is no hope for us. So, that the judgment, that thou mightest show thy judgment the sooner. So we don't want no learning time, do we? So she replied to me and said, the creation cannot make more haste than the Creator, than the mother and the father. Yes, but it's the mother who is identified as the life giver. Neither can the world hold at one time those who have been created in it. So that's a lot of people, because I understand the earth can hold quite a few people, despite them wanting to teach us that, oh, we're coming to our end. I've been told quite differently. And I said, how hast thou said to thy servant that thou wilt certainly give life at one time to thy creation? So the servant was identified as Israel, and that's the daughters identified, the feminine. It's the seed of the woman, and the children are called by her name, not the man's name. It was never to be Adam's vineyard. It was to be her vineyard, Israel's vineyard, the woman's vineyard. And it is, by the end, a woman shall circle a man, Adam. And I said, how hast thou said to thy servant that thou wilt certainly give life at one time to thy creation? If therefore all creatures will live at one time, and the creature will sustain them, or the creation will sustain them, it might even now be able to support all of them present at one time. And she said to me, ask a woman's womb, and say to it, if you bear 10 children, why one after another? Request it therefore to produce 10 at one time. So we know that there's a set plan that God has laid out, that all creation will follow. And I said, of course it cannot, but only each in its own time. And she said to me, even so have I given the womb of the earth to those who from time to time are sown in it. For as an infant does not bring forth, and a woman who has become old does not bring forth any longer, so have I organized the world which I created. Then I inquired and said, since thou hast now given me the opportunity, let me speak before thee. Is our mother of whom thou hast told me still young, or is she now approaching old age? And she replied to me, ask a woman who bears children, and she will tell you. Say to her, why are those whom you have borne recently not like those whom you bore before, but smaller in stature? And she herself will answer you, those born in the strength of youth are different from those born during the time of old age, when the womb is failing. Therefore, you also should consider that you and your contemporaries are smaller in stature than those who were before you. And those who come after you will be smaller than you, as born of a creation which already is aging and passing the strength of youth. And I said, O Lord, I beseech thee, if I have found favor in thy sight, show thy servant through whom thou dost visit thy creation. So that's the end of chapter 5. And I will try to make the next video pretty close to this one, I hope within a few days apart, I hope. This one's quite long, so I'm going to end it there. And because I do view 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 quite important to read, because it does further our understanding and add to this theology of truth that we have come to understand by understanding what the key of David was. And so we looked at the number of a man very briefly. But by understanding that, you know, the key of Solomon versus the key of David, it does so link us to the beast system, and how that beast system was built up over time, and how it does so link to the number 666, which was the gold, I believe, that Solomon used in building up the temple, wherein man would worship man, or a harlot spirit that would worship a man. So, there we go. There's the video. I'll call it at that. I hope we learned something from it. I pray the Lord blesses you all with an abundance of truth. I thank you all for watching my video, and I hope you all have